Hello everybody and welcome back. In this video we're going to begin the process of actually implementing the business logic into our registration page. So with that said, let's get into it and let's see how to do it. The first thing that I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be adding some more variables to my register page state class, which are going to hold reference to the different providers and services that I require at the different intervals of the registration process. So with that said, let's do that before, and then we'll look at some other things. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to come to the register page state, and here I'm going to create a variable late, which is going to store a reference to our authentication provider, and I'm going to call this _auth. With this, I'm going to add another one, and this is going to be storing a reference to our database service. And with this, I'm going to call this _db. And then finally, I'll add another late variable, which will hold the reference to our cloud storage service. And I'm going to call this _cloud storage service. With this, I'm going to do command save. And now I'm going to move on over to the build function. And here I'm going to be actually grabbing references to whatever providers and services that I need. So the first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to take our auth variable and I'm going to set that equal to be provider.auth authentication provider. And then I'm just going to pass in the context, and this should go and grab the authentication provider from the widget tree for us. Since our registration page is part of our main app, material app, and the material app is wrapped inside of a multi-provider, and one of the providers is an authentication provider, we for sure know that our registration page will have access to a provider of type authentication provider. So we can safely do this function. With this, the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to set the db variable equal to getIt dot instance, instance dot get, and then the get is going to be of type database service, and then I'll add the parentheses to invoke it. Finally, I'll add the cloud storage, and I'll do the same thing. So I'll just copy over the line of code. I'll copy it here, and then this time, instead of getting our database service, I'll get our cloud storage service. And with this, I'll do command save. Now that this is done, what we can do is that we can move onwards to our actual authentication provider function, and inside of our authentication provider function, we can actually create the function which is going to be responsible for actually registering our user. So let's do that now. So to do this, it's going to be very simple. It's going to be similar to how we had created our login using email and password function, but this time, instead of logging in using email and password, we're going to be registering a user. So I'm going to create a function inside of here, which will be a function which will return a future. And this time the future is going to return an optional string back to us. The reason it's optional is because we might fail registering a user. In that case, we won't return anything, so it's an optional. And then I'm going to call this function register user email, and then register user using, I guess, email and password. And with this, I am going to open the parentheses up, and I'm going to say that we're going to get two things passed to this function. The first is going to be a string, which is going to pass in the email to us. And then the other one is going to be a string, which is going to pass as the password to us. And then I'll mark this function as an asynchronous function, and I'll open it up. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add a try-catch block, just because we do expect this function to fail sometimes. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a function which is going to be of type user credential. And with this, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to call this function credentials. And then I'm going to set that equal to an await call, where we're going to call the auth dot and then create user with email and password function. And inside of here, I'll pass in the email that gets passed in, as well as the password that gets passed in. And then I'll add the semicolon, and I'll do command save. And with this, what I'll do is that I'll return, once this call completes, our credentials dot user, and I'll add an exclamation mark at then dot UID. And if for some reason we get an error, I'm going to first check for a on Firebase Auth exception. And in this case, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just do a print statement where I'm going to say error registering user. And then I'm going to have a general catch statement as well, in which I am going to just print the error to console if it's not a Firebase Auth exception. So that's pretty much all we had to do for our register using email and password function. So now that our authentication provider does have the specific function, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add another function to our authentication provider since we're here, and that function is going to be responsible for logging out our user. And it's going to be a function which is going to return a feature of type void. It's going to be called logout. It's going to be an asynchronous function. And then it's going to open up. It's going to have a very simple try catch block inside of it. So try, and then the only thing that we're going to do inside of the try block is that we're going to await the auth.signout function. So there it is. And then if we get an error, then we're just simply going to print that error to the console and do command save. And that's pretty much all we had to do. And with this, I am going to close my authentication provider. So now that our authentication provider has all of the necessary functionality, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go back to my register page function. And here we are going to go back to our register button function. And here what we're going to do is that we're going to start adding logic to our onPressed function. And we're going to do one thing at a time. First thing first, we got to validate the user's input. Then we got to register the user. Then we've got to upload their image. And then finally, we've got to create or copy over the information that we have into our Firestore database instance. So we have a representation of the user inside of the user's collection inside of the database. So we'll take one step at a time. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be validating that the provided information to us is complete and correct. So to do that, inside of the onPressed function, I'm going to say that if our register form key, so that's our form, dot current state, and then I'm going to add an exclamation mark, dot validate function checks out, and our underscore profile image is not equals to null. So we got to remember that we also need to provide a profile image. Then in that case, we are going to be proceed, let's just say continue with registering user. And I'll just leave the comment here for now. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to leave this if statement as is, and I'm going to do command save. So now with this, we are essentially going to, in the next video, actually create some of the other helper methods that we need inside of our database service, as well as our cloud storage service, to one, save the user to the database, and second, to save the user's image to the cloud storage location. And then once we have those two pieces of code written up, we're then going to import everything into our registration page, and we're going to be adding all of the logic in to this if block here. So with that, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.